Hi, I'm Trevor Blumenau, CEO of Voodoo Robotics, and I just wanted to go through the installation of these turbo devices with you. These turbos, actually you can add multiple turbos to a warehouse, and you can put them in different parts of your warehouse to extend the range for which the tags can communicate. So, you know, in different parts of your warehouse, maybe you've got like a small room in one part, or an L-shaped warehouse or something like that, and so you might need multiple of these devices to communicate with all of your tags. But you can also put multiple of these devices in a smaller area for your tags, and these devices actually will speed up the communication to your tags. So, you know, even if you have pretty good coverage with one of these devices, you might still want more than one device just to improve the speed at which devices respond. So, and these devices, they're designed to overlap in coverage. So you don't really need to worry about, you know, devices in conflict with each other or anything like that. So let's talk about the turbo device. You know, we have a couple of different versions of the turbo, so yours might look a little bit different to this one. Let's go through each of the ports on here and what it does, what they do. This right here is the power button. Turbos are designed to turn on automatically at boot up. So as soon as you plug them in, they should boot up themselves. So you shouldn't need any, you shouldn't be touching the power button. You shouldn't need to. You might already have one or more dongles in here installed. Those should stay in. And you should have at least 2 open USB ports on your turbo device. And that's for a keyboard and mouse. And sometimes you can actually use a combined device. Sometimes they have like a little you know, Bluetooth dongle that supports both a wireless keyboard and mouse. You can use that as well. That shouldn't be a problem. The idea is that you hook up a keyboard and mouse to the device and a monitor to the device to facilitate setup. And then once you've got it set up, you can disconnect your keyboard and mouse, disconnect your monitor, and then you can mount this device to the wall. We'll talk about the mounting hardware in a second. And you know, you can put it up high wherever you need to put this device. But then, you know, you don't need the monitoring mouse and keyboard connected to it once it's set up. So, okay, so the other side we have, as I was saying, there's a connection for the monitor. We actually have 2 connections for monitors. So here is a VGA, and here's a HDMI. And you can choose either one, doesn't matter. The other things on the back, here's the power port, right? So here's a power plug, and the power port just plugs in there, and of course it has to get power. And then this is an Ethernet port. The preferred way to hook these things up is with Ethernet because it's just more reliable than Wi-Fi. But obviously in your warehouse, you're not going to have Ethernet drops everywhere. So we anticipate that these probably will be connected via Wi-Fi. And we'll show you in this video how to select whether you're connected via Ethernet or Wi-Fi. And then the last little connection point right here is for a headphone jack, and that you can totally ignore that. That's just inconsequential. Okay, so let's talk about the mounting bracket that comes with this. This is a typical mounting bracket, and the idea is that you put the mounting bracket on the wall where you want the turbo to go, and you have to drill you know, holes you know, for some screws. So you've got some screws. You should have these in the pack, or you might need to get some aftermarket screws. Here we've got some anchors as well. But the idea is that you use the screws and anchors to fix this where you want the turbo to hang. And then the turbo has little screws on the back that fit into the slots. And so you fit the turbo in there like that, and then feed them into the slot. And then once you've got that set up, the turbo's not going to go anywhere. It just hangs like that on the wall. So let's switch over to the video and have a look at, once you have this plugged in with power, keyboard, mouse, and monitor, you'll see that the turbo comes up and looks like this. Okay, so this is what your turbo will look like when you get it set up This is the window that you'll see in the turbo device, and you can see already in the top left corner here, it's a very simple selector. You can select Wi-Fi or Ethernet. If you select Wi-Fi, you can select your Wi-Fi network here and put in your router password over here. Or if you just select Ethernet, that's a direct connection over Ethernet, as I mentioned. Now, these two fields down here, this is not about your router station ID, and this is not your router password. This is actually your Scootkeeper, www.scootkeeper.com username and password over here. And this account has to have API access associated with it. So we'll talk about that in another video. When you first create an account with us, we do enable that, and so if you haven't turned it off, it's probably already on. But basically, you put in your username here and your password here, and then when you hit connect, you'll see that it'll grab an IP address for you over here, just to show you if something goes wrong, if it can't connect to the Scootkeeper system or the backend database of the system. You'll get that status information over here. These two numbers are actually very, very important, because the one number is actually the number of devices in your database, and the other number is the number of devices that this turbo can actually see currently. And you can see that this number sometimes goes up and down a little bit, and that's because it's looking at those devices that are well within communication range with a what we call a dBm that's greater than -80 over here. And this value right here, this is a list in reverse chronological order of the tags that it's last seen. So, for example, here's a tag I've got in front of me. I'm going to push the button on this tag, and you'll see that that changes instantly right there. And so I can then select that tag, and you can actually see the status information from that tag up here. As I push the button on here, you can actually see that it catches that tag up there, shows that it became active, and in fact there's an active status piece of information over here. So when it turns on, you can see that it turns on over there, and turns off, you can see that it turns off. Pretty simple. This over here, if this tag is registered, and this one is, this is going to show you the location and area of that tag. It also shows you the firmware that tag is running. And in fact, I can actually run a little test write to the tag. So here I'm going to write to the tag, and we'll see it takes a little bit of time. There you go. It got the message. And consequently, because we did a test write, you can actually see over here a little bit of information about the latency, how long it took to find the tag, how long it took to initiate communication, and then how long it took to write to the tag. So let's do another one. I'll hold it up so you can see over here. Normally it takes about between 1.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds to communicate to a tag from a turbo. So on average it's about 2 seconds. Down here is also some very important information, and again, this is associated with this tag that we selected. That's the most recent tag. So as soon as we select that tag, it fills in all of this information down here, and this is the log of the communication with that tag. So you can basically you use this pull down here to zero in on this tag ID. Okay, so let's talk about this information down over here. This is your current signal strength, and generally anything above -80 is a very good signal. And the tag will communicate quite well with any value that's above -80. If you see values that are below that, you need to start worrying about how far your devices are from your turbo. Maybe you want to add extra turbos. Adding extra turbos, these turbos overlap. They're designed to overlap, and so adding extra turbos only increases the speed of communication with device, because these devices, let's say you send 5 communications at once to a bunch of devices, the turbos will actually divide that up and they'll each take responsibility for, let's say the 2 turbos, one will take 3, the other one will take 2, and so it ends up actually speeding up the communication. And also, obviously, if you've got a wide area in your warehouse, you're going to need more turbos because you need to communicate around a corner or something like that. Let's say you've got an L-shaped warehouse, something like that. Normally we get about a 75-foot range out of these turbos between the turbo and the device, and you can actually boost that a little bit if you go in and edit the tag information, which we'll show you in another video. You can boost that slightly, but in general we don't encourage that because you don't want too much overlapping signals happening in your warehouse. So you want like about 100 of these devices communicating to a turbo maximum. You shouldn't really go above that, although the system will more than handle 100 devices. But if you start to go above 100 devices, every once in a while you'll start missing packets and things like that. So you don't want to increase the signal strength of all your tags necessarily, because if you've got, let's say, 1,000 tags, then all your tags start interfering with each other because they have a longer reach. So we recommend that you leave the signal strength on the tags the way they're set. Okay, so I'm sorry, back to this information down here. So this is the signal strength. This right here, this is the add interval. So this is the frequency at which your turbo is picking up wake-ups from this tag. So the device is designed to wake up every half second, which is 500 milliseconds. And so you should see this value pretty close to 500 milliseconds. If this is exactly at 500 milliseconds, that means that the turbo and the communication between the device is perfect. No drop packets at all. But if you see that, very often this number will go up a little bit, and that means that, as expected, once in a while the device will wake up, send a transmit, and there's no, for one reason or another, that transmit is not heard at the turbo. So anyway, and then you can see over here, this is actually a count of all the receptions of advertisements. So again, if we're doing 2 per second, right, 1 every half second, that would be 2 every second. This thing should be, counting up about, in 2s every second. So you can look at this number. Now, of course, and this is showing you the last communication time, which is based on the clock. And of course, if you stop the communication, so here's this device, we're looking at this device. Let me do this. I'm going to open this device right now. I'm going to open it up. Excuse me for a second. There we go. We opened the device, disconnected it from its battery, and you can actually see down here that all of a sudden this information stopped. So that's a sign, if you don't see the communication over here, that this device is out of range and the turbo cannot communicate to it, or that the batteries are disconnected. Now let me connect the batteries back up, and you'll see in a second, you'll see that the advertisements start to come back, and in fact you can actually see logs of communications to this device over here, and you can, on the right hand side again, you can see the communication information. So very, very useful tool here for analyzing the communication between the turbo and the devices. Just to let you know, some of this information down in the right corner over here, of course you've got voltage information, very useful to have the voltage dynamically available to you. Again, you can see whether it's active or not. The uptime hours is a very useful thing. If you've got a device that for some reason is resetting itself every few hours, maybe it's got some sort of fault, you'll see that this number will be very low. Of course, in this particular case, for this particular tag, the number is low because we just restarted it not too long ago. So that's the basics of how to use this turbo interface, how to set it up. And again, the idea is that once you get this turbo set up and connected, primarily you've got to fill in these 4 fields That's the real reason why you plug in a monitor and why you put in a connect a keyboard and connect a mouse, so that you can fill in these 4 fields. And of course, once you've done that, you then excuse me, will take the turbo and mount it to the wall. But I would not suggest that you do that right now. If you're going through the tutorial, what I suggest that you do is actually take the turbo and leave it running in this mode, and go through our next video, which will be the setup of the devices themselves that you received. And that, it always is useful if you've got those things on the desk in front of you, to make sure that all of your devices are working and communicating with the turbo. And then once you get all that up and running, then you can go and place your devices in their appropriate locations and hang the turbo. Sometimes you have to take the turbo out into the warehouse and actually have the monitor out in the warehouse, just so that you can see these signal strengths to particular tags, and make sure that you've got good coverage for different tags in different areas. And of course, I'll say that these devices, we'd like to think that every single one of them is perfectly equal to any other, but there is some slight variation sometimes in manufacture of these devices, and you'll see the signal strength vary by plus or minus 5 dBm on the scale here. So you just have to. And then, of course, these numbers vary all over the place. So one time it may wake up and it might have one signal strength, another time it might have a different signal strength. And so, these things are radios, and sometimes they don't communicate well right at the edge of their range. So the idea is that you can use this very powerful interface to actually debug the connection between the turbo and the device. It's very, very useful interface. And actually, we'll show you in the next video, when we're setting up these devices, the areas and locations. We'll show you a similar sort of interface in the Android app, which you can use to do somewhat similar debugging. Also very, very powerful. So that's the end of the introduction to the turbo device. Again, we're very happy to have you as a customer, and please tune in to the next video.